pop star who performs with plants and flowers sticking out of his back pocket, and whose heroes aren't rock stars, but Oscar Wilde and James Dean, another sensitive young chap about whom he's written a book. In view of his rather fey appeal to sixth formers and bedsit adolescents, I first asked Morrissey what life at school had been like for him. Tough?
Yes, it was quite tough because I went to a very threadbare school, a very a school which it ultimately got some global attention for being the most brutal school in the country, capital punishment. You virtually didn't have to do a thing to be persistently whipped.
Did you get beaten?
For some obscure reason, I always avoided it. I always thought they considered me far too delicate to be caned. I constantly thought that they presumed that if they hit me, that I'd just disappear. But it was really quite an absurd school, and working class, the only thing that you could possibly do was woodwork. And obviously, when you left school, you would, you know, go into a factory or something. There was no question of being artistic or of reading books or of thinking about anything specific. I remember at one point, one instance, all the pupils were asked to write about their favourite book, and I wrote about the dictionary. And I remember I was virtually expelled for being so obstreperous and perverse. So it was that kind of school. It was the kind of school that gave no scope whatsoever for individuality.
Did you have any friends among the other pupils?
I did. I must say that I did. I did seem to attract the more obscure elements of the school, the kind of person that never had any friends, the very lanky, bespectacled, spotted failure somehow was attracted to me, and I thought that was quite interesting.
Is it true that you spent 3 months secluded in your bedroom as a teenager?
Much more than that, I'm sure, but I do distinctly remember one period where I hardly ever left the room for a 3-month period.
What were you doing in there?
Well, that's a good question. I used to write furiously, and I was just really nailed to the typewriter, and I was swimming in paper and all kind of introspective things like that. I wasn't exactly your average teenager.
Did you want to stay there?
The alternatives weren't very glamorous. If I left the room, I'd probably end up at some obscure pub or wandering about the park, which was always quite dangerous. I really had no options. I mean, I was living the kind of life. I was unemployed for a very long time and I had no money. And I was living a life to a large degree that I didn't choose, being financially absurdly embarrassed. So it really seemed to me that I would never ever settle for second best in life. That if I couldn't have exactly what I wanted, then I would have absolutely nothing. Because to me, nothing always seemed more important to me than a false something or something that I didn't really want. So therefore I stayed in. I did nothing. I just wrote, and I was determined that if I couldn't have exactly what I wanted, then I would disappear into the woodwork.
Because most teenagers become obsessed with sex.
Mm.
Did you go through that period?
No, I never did. I think I brushed quite close when I was 19 and 20, but previous to that period I didn't give it a great deal of thought, and it wasn't really something that I really needed to think about, because in my life it didn't really exist. I was aware that certain things should have occurred and certain things should interest me. And I was aware of teenagers around me frolicking about and being incredibly inconsequential and free-thinking, which I never was.
You regret not sowing in wild oats, etc.
Yes, I do. I do regret that.
In those days, did you spend any evenings fumbling in the back seats of cinemas?
Fumbling in haystacks? No, I certainly didn't. Whenever I went to cinemas, I always raced for the front seat, I'm afraid. I was that boring.
You say in other interviews that you're now celibate.
Mm.
Is that true?
Yes, I'm afraid so. I don't have a certificate, but I can only say that I am.
Was your celibacy then prompted by a bad experience?
I've had very few experiences, but they have been bad, yes, and they were a very long time ago. And it's not something that I would like to repeated. But this gets incredibly delicate and icy, and it becomes almost difficult to talk about. But yes, I would say that it was. I did lose the very idea that any communion between two people could possibly be enjoyable. I did lose that particular thread, and I did become enormously depressed to the point where I believed that any kind of relationship was almost impossible.
But you once said that being a sex symbol was the best thing to be.
But that was at a time when I thought that it could possibly never happen, and to a small degree it has happened. I
So
mean,
do you consider yourself a sex symbol?
well, other people do seem to, so therefore in a way I suppose I must be. I mean, it's not something that we decide for ourselves. We don't say, yes, I'm going to be a sex symbol, and I will appeal to lots of people in an immensely sexual way. That's not something that we decide. Other people decide it, and to some degree they have. I mean, I get letters saying, Morrissey, you're incredibly sexy, and of course I throw them away.
You throw them away?
No, I frame them.
What do you do with them?
Oh, I keep them all. I reply to them and take their phone numbers, etc. No, I don't.
You're being slightly flippant.
Yes, I'm being unnecessarily flippant.
How contrived is your public image?
It's not in the least bit contrived, but when you fall into the public eye, it seems to me that regardless of what you do or what you wear or what you say, it is construed as an image. I mean, you can wear no clothes at all and that will be seen as an image. So it's really quite inescapable, the whole thing. So there's no answer to that. One comes under the searchlights, the scorching searchlights, and everything that you do is an image.
Yes, I mean, walking around with foliage coming out your back pocket could be construed as being an image, could it not?
Possibly, yes.
Why do you do that?
I can see that. For quite delicate reasons, severe interest I had in nature and being close to nature, which is something that Oscar Wilde felt, and I always thought was quite passionate and quite amusing. The idea of constantly carrying flowers, or of being simply immersed in leaves. I quite liked that. It was quite poetic.
I think a lot of people would say that your image is sort of rather wet, really.
They do. Some people do. I would say that more people don't. I think that people see me as being quite delicate, which in the world of popular music and rock and roll, if you like, is anathema. It is the worst thing to be delicate and not to be this big macho whatever. So therefore, since flowers and any kind of nature is just connected with total whimpery, to some degree I fall into that bracket. But I think I have other things that help me scramble out of the pit.
Like what?
Well, the words that I write, which is principally why I'm here. I mean, I'm not here to dissect insects or do anything like that. I'm here principally because I write.
Well, one of the lyrics, some of the lyrics you've written in Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now. Why do I spend my time talking to people I'd rather kick in the eye? Who would you like to kick in the eye?
Well, on the very brief spasms of employment that I had in the past, it always seemed to me there were moments of the day when I would realize that I was here working with these people that I despise, and I have to talk to these horrible people and ask them what they did yesterday, and I would have to report to a boss that I couldn't stand. And when you're in that position, which was the absolute basis of Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now, you realize that you're actually spending your entire life living with people that you do not like, and doing something that you do not like, which was incredibly distressing. So that was the basis of that song. I mean, kick in the eye. Yes, literally, sometimes, I mean, let's be perfectly honest, sometimes we do get so angry with people that we're not averse to violence, which, of course, is a terrible thing to say, but truth nonetheless.
Would Oscar Wilde have approved?
Probably. I think he would.
Morrissey, the Quentin